From the 2018 Southern Kentucky Book Fest, I'm Barbara Deeb, and it's Outside the Book. Jessica Strawser joins us now. A native of Pittsburgh, she now makes her home in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she writes domestic suspense novels. Thanks for being here, first of all.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So what's a domestic suspense novel? What is
That's the burning question, right?
Yeah.
So I think a domestic suspense novel is where the suspense comes from relationships in your everyday life, from within your family, your friendships, your marriage, parenthood, things like that.
There's plenty of suspense in those areas, aren't there?
Yes, exactly.
Now, in your novels, point of view is really important.
Yes.
In particular, the current book, it's the point of view of neighbors who are kind of helping to move the story.
Yes. I really enjoy writing from multiple perspectives. I think, I also enjoy reading books from multiple perspectives, but I think as I've read through the years, I really like the idea that there's so much talk of unreliable narrators, and when people talk about that, they're really thinking of highly unreliable narrators, like in Gone Girl and Girl on a Train. But I really think that every narrator is a little bit unreliable just from their own narrow perspective.
You mean because they come with a frame of reference already?
Exactly. You're influenced by everything that's shaped you as a person, and also you only know what you can see and what you can perceive. And so I love stories where you kind of can only get the whole story by getting every point of view, characters' perspectives. There would be no other way.
Well, no, you're
to
a
get the
journalist,
story.
right?
I was
By
a
trade,
journalist.
you studied, so that makes good sense because you're
Yes.
getting all the pieces of the puzzle to tell the story.
Yes, exactly. So in Not That I Could Tell, a woman has gone missing, and really nobody knows what happened, and her neighbors were the last people to see her, and they kind of have to come to terms with the fact that they might never know what actually happened. They can only go on their own recollections and their own perceptions, but we also get her perspective in just these tiny little chapters interspersed throughout the book, bit by bit.
Oh, no, wait, so they might have to come to terms that they may not ever solve this story.
Exactly.
But a coming to terms can mean many different things.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So is that expressed in the book?
It is. I think, I'm really interested in what our responsibility is to one another, how much responsibility we have for what happens to the people who we care about. And,
Even if we don't care about them, do we still have that obligation?
I don't know. That's what the
for the next
characters
book,
wrestle
right?
with. Yes, exactly.
But I mean, so it is really basically the human condition, the human relationship.
Yes. That is definitely what drives me as a writer. I write from a central question that I often don't even know the answer to, but I like to have my characters kind of try to find the answers along the way and maybe give the reader something to think about.
Well, and so your characters are really important.
Yes.
Yes. How do you develop your characters? Do you live them?
I was a theater minor in college, so I do think I have a little bit of a not like a method acting, but I definitely kind of mentally put myself in their shoes and just kind of, I don't know, I have an overactive imagination. I've always had an overactive imagination.
And don't you think
that's
critical for an author?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead with the character development.
Oh, so I don't know. I think in the case of Not That I Could Tell, I knew that this woman was going to go missing. There's sort of an ensemble cast of all of the neighbors who were the last women to see her, and they're not very good witnesses. They're unreliable witnesses because the last night they were sitting around a fire pit and they had much too much to drink, and so their memories of that night are pretty foggy. So I really had to think about which characters would be the most interesting to tell the story, and I chose two very different women who were at two very different places in their lives. One is the closest friend in the neighborhood of the woman who's gone missing. So with her, I really kind of delved into that character from the perspective of how you would feel if your closest friend in the neighborhood, if this had happened, and just developed her life around that. And then the other woman is She's new to the neighborhood. She's single. She has no attachments. She's not super emotionally invested in what has happened to her neighbor. So she's almost more of a curious bystander. So her character was pretty freestanding in the novel. And
if you want to find out more, you're going to have to read the novel. Just very quickly, you also serve as editor-at-large for Writer's Digest.
Yes.
So you get to do what I'm doing right now and interview authors.
Yes, I spent about a decade doing that as editorial director, and it was wonderful. And yes, now I'm doing it from the outside.
Very fun. Continued success to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks
We've
for
been
having
talking
me.
with author Jessica Strawser on Outside the Book. Thanks for being with us for Outside the Book here at the 2018 Southern Kentucky Book Fest. We're coming to you from the Carol Nicely Center in Bowling Green. It's located on WKU South Campus. I'm Barbara Deeb, and I am joined now by author Mike Mullin, who writes young adult science fiction and fantasy. So Mike, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You did not start out to be a writer, although you did have some teachers along the way who said you might have a knack
Sure.
for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a crazy science teacher, Mrs. Rittman, who thought that everybody should be a writer, but everybody should be a scientist, but she thought scientists had to be good writers. So when you came into her science class, she'd make you write a page about anything. She didn't care what it was about. She didn't even grade it. She'd just look at it and make sure you did it. And so I wrote my first novel a page a day in science class in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and it was called Captain Poopy's Sewer Adventures. It was brilliant.
It was brilliant, and maybe you can publish that now.
Oh no, my mother says she has it, and every time I go to her house, I try to find it because I want to burn it.
No.
I don't want anyone to ever to see that.
But then, you move on, you said you did home repair, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And then at what point did you say, and you picked one of the toughest, one of the more popular genres, but
Sure.
young adult, that's tough stuff.
Yeah, well, I basically, about 10 years ago, became an author because I got fired from every other job I tried. My remodeling company went bankrupt, I tried other things, just nothing worked out. It turns out that I'm really bad at working, at having a boss, and I don't like customers or employees, which is a big problem.
Well, but
writing is the
writing,
thing you
yeah,
can do
yeah.
if you're that kind of person. It's wonderful because, I don't really have a boss anymore. I mean, my editor's sort of a boss, but I can go a month without talking to her and it's fine. So it's a perfect kind of job for me.
But you make it sound simple, and someone watching, we have a lot of aspiring writers.
Sure.
But I mean, it's not just that simple, is it?
No. I mean, you do have to work very hard to become a good enough writer, and that's one thing I'm good at is sort of self-directed work, right? So yeah, you have to write a lot, you have to read a ton, and you have to figure that your first few books aren't going to be good enough. They're going to be like Captain Poopy's Sewer Adventures, so, the book I wrote in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, or the book I wrote when I was starting out trying to write a book and sell it, Heart's Blood, which you can't buy because it never sold because it sucked. Oh my God, it was bad.
But it taught you something, didn't it?
Absolutely.
The old what not to do?
Exactly,
Yeah?
exactly. And the only really way to learn that is by trying, right? By trying
Right.
and failing. You have to be willing to fail to do this.
And
And
so,
I'm very good at failing.
but it looks like things
That
are
is
turning
expertise
around
for
for
me.
you. Well, what about science fiction and fantasy? I mean, that's kind of a fun, right? Because you can create your own world.
Absolutely. So the main reason I write what I write is because I was trying to write the kind of thing I love to read.
What do
I
you
started
love to
reading,
read?
I started reading young adult when I was about 10 years old, and I never quit. I just kept reading it. And I also am a huge science fiction and fantasy fan. I grew up reading Asimov and Heinlein, and now I've graduated all the wonderful new people on the scene. Paolo Bacigalupi is one of my favorite newer authors, and I love it. So it was very natural to write that. And it's a great idea if you're wanting to be a writer to figure out what kind of thing you want to read and write that, right?
Exactly. So the Ashfall series, extremely popular.
Yes.
Take us through. We've got Alex. We've got Darla.
Yeah, so Ashfall is about Alex, a 15-year-old who lives in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And one week his mother decides she wants the whole family to visit relatives in Warren, Illinois, just for the weekend. But Alex doesn't want to go. He's got his friends, his bike, his computer games.
He's 15.
Yeah, right. So so his mother decides to let him stay home alone just for the weekend. What can go wrong? He's 15, he's a pretty responsible guy. Well, what does go wrong is the Yellowstone supervolcano erupts and plunges the world into this horrible natural disaster. And so Ashfall is about Alex struggling to survive this natural disaster and find his family.
And so the series is so popular, you wrote a second,
Yes.
and then a third.
Yes, it's a
and then
trilogy.
your readers said, we love this series.
Yeah.
Number 4?
Yes, there will be a number 4. Yes, I'm about halfway through my third attempt at the first rough draft of that book.
Let's do the math on that one. Third attempt at my first rough draft. Okay, you're working it.
I've written it twice, or half of it twice, decided I was really going the wrong direction, started over. I'm really struggling with it, to be honest with you, but I'll get there. It's
do you put stuff, do you write it and then put it aside and have to leave it for a while and then come back?
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's really good to do that, especially between your first draft and when you start editing, because if you can forget it a little bit, get it out of your head a little bit, sometimes you can come back to it with a fresher mind and see the problems in the structure and whatnot more easily.
You know, we talked to Phil Bildner earlier, and he writes for young adults. He really is.
He's a really good speaker, too.
And he is a great speaker. But young adults, he is so optimistic about the future of that cohort.
Yeah.
Are you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what young adults are doing. I mean, they are making a difference in our political system finally, maybe making some progress on getting common sense gun regulations. They are more open, more tolerant and accepting of other people, other differences. They're way more proponents of diversity. Yeah, absolutely. I'm hugely optimistic. Actually, the thing I worry about the most in terms of the future for our country and the world in general is that lifespans are increasing so fast. And what will we do when we finally do overcome aging? And I believe we will. That eventually, not in my lifetime, but within a couple of lifetimes, we'll have the capability of having more or less immortal people. And the problem with old people is they calcify. They get set in their ways. They don't change. And so how are we as a society going to deal with that? And that's what terrifies me, right? What happens when people don't die?
Well, listen, I think that would be fodder for your next series.
And someday I'll write about that, I'm sure.
There you will. We've been talking with author Mike Mullin. He's the author of the very popular young adult series, Ashfall. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
The 2018 Southern Kentucky Book Fest. I'm Barbara Deeb, and you are watching Outside the Book. We are joined now by Joe. Pronounce your last name for me so I say it right.
Joe Wos.
Wos.
If I ever write a biography, it's going to be called Woes Is Me.
Woes is me, and it's W-O-S,
Yes,
but a lot of
that's
people
it.
say Woz, but it's Woes.
Yes.
But what I would call you is amazing, because you make these amazing mazes, and that's incredible. So puzzles, you like that sort of puzzle?
Yeah, I grew up in the 1970s, and in the mid 70s, mazes were sort of a fad and phenomenon at the time, and I latched onto it right away. But I was always frustrated because those placemat mazes and cereal box mazes were always too easy, and so I started creating these mazes that were much more challenging by integrating the illustrations within the solvable part of the maze. So usually when you see mazes with illustrations, the illustration is either around the maze or to the side of the maze or not quite integrated. So I tried to change that up.
And in so doing, that makes it a little more challenging?
It makes it much more challenging. I do a couple things to make my mazes challenging. First, the integration of the illustrations, because the human eye has a way of closing off lines to see complete images. So if I were to draw a circle, but leave a gap in that circle, you would see it as a circle. You wouldn't necessarily recognize that gap right away. So when I draw a chicken in a drawing, you don't necessarily realize that you can go through the beak and then back through the comb and through the neck. The other trick I use to make my mazes more challenging is most people cheat when they do mazes.
Do they?
They start from the finish.
You heard it here.
And work their way back. Okay, that's the secret to mazes. Because most mazes, there's more than one path coming out of the start, but only one path going into the finish. So if you work backwards, you've eliminated, the odds are in your favor. So when I draw a maze, I start from the start, drawing and working my characters, and then I work from the finish backwards, so that no matter which way you start, you're starting from the start.
Now, you talked about this being a phenom back in the 70s. So generations today really appreciate this as well. So it's never really gone away.
It's never gone away. Mazes are perhaps the world's oldest interactive art form, where the audience is an integral part of completing the art form. A maze is not truly done until it's been solved. But you can certainly go back to mythology, Greek mythology, and the story of the labyrinth. The Isle of Minos, there were mazes, of course, in the murals, and many churches, mosques. You'll see mazes and labyrinths on the ground. So it's an art form that's been around for a very long time and has remained popular for thousands of years.
You ever met a maze you couldn't complete?
I have never met a maze I couldn't complete. Except once. I was drawing a maze for Ripley's Believe It or Not. It was 5 feet high by 8 feet wide, drawn on vinyl with a Sharpie, and I lost track while I was drawing it. And I unintentionally made the maze unsolvable, and I had to start over.
Wow.
That's the only time that's ever happened to me, that I had to start over.
You also, in addition to these amazing maze books, you also are the resident cartoonist at the Charles M. Schulz Museum in California.
Yes, I am, yes.
Charles M. Schulz, for those of you that don't know, created Charlie Brown and Peanuts, and what do you do there?
So, I started going there when they first opened 16 years ago. They invited me to come out to do my performance. I do a performance where I illustrate stories live as I tell them on stage, and then I also do cartooning workshops. So I visit every year, twice a year. I spend every Thanksgiving there, my Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, and then I spend a week over the summer doing a summer camp and then performing for guests on the weekends.
Wow. So you illustrate the story as it's happening.
Yes, it's like watching a picture book be created and told before your very eyes. So a single show might be up to 15, 20 drawings.
So if I could get in your head and see what you see, okay, because you talked about mazes and how, finite lines, and sometimes we need to step, pardon the cliche, outside the box.
Yes.
Do you see outside the box?
I do. I'm dyslexic. And I regard it as this sort of great gift that enabled me to see the world in very different ways. I think, many dyslexics, when they look at a page with some words on it, when I was younger, those letters would sort of bounce around. And so what I learned to do was to take those letters and gain control of them and use them in my drawings. And that taught me to read, that taught me to write, that taught me to draw. But it's all in how you see the world in an interesting way, and then finding a way to make that work for you within the parameters of the world as it is. So I was sort of forced to think of creative ways just to function, to be able to read and write. And it's been a great gift for me.
It truly has. So do you have a favorite cartoon? I mean, obviously, if you're the resident cartoonist at the Charles Schulz Museum, you got to like the Peanuts characters.
Yes, Snoopy is my all-time favorite. One of the first things I learned to draw. My other favorite I also have a connection with, and that is Charlie the Tuna. From Starkist fame. I'm actually the brand character integrity consultant for Charlie the Tuna. So when you see Charlie the Tuna appear on a website or in a commercial, very often they'll give me scripts to review, and I say things like, a talking tuna wouldn't say that. Or
how does somebody get
Charlie
that?
can never wear his hat backwards. He has to wear it forwards.
How does somebody get that kind of gig?
I ran a cartoon museum for 7 years. I was the founder and executive director of the Toonseum in Pittsburgh. And I had approached Starkist about doing an exhibit for Charlie the Tuna's 50th anniversary. And they realized, boy, you seem to know a lot about Charlie the Tuna. And so they started asking me to sort of advise on things and do other exhibits. And before I knew it, I was handling a lot of things to do with Charlie. So it's great fun. I love Charlie.
Yeah, so your job is fun.
I have a lot of different fun jobs. I do a lot of different things to sort of all make one career out of about 100 different things.
Yeah, so what's next?
What's next? I have a couple more books coming out. Barron's Books is going to continue my Maze series. We did Myths and Monsters, and we did Amazing Animals. The next two books are Mesozoic, which is all dinosaur mazes. And then that is going to be followed by Amazing America, 50 mazes of the 50 states. And then I'm also working on a children's book called Little Sophie's Selfie.
Okay.
About a little girl who travels the world and is constantly bored because she doesn't see the world around her. She only sees selfies. She only takes pictures of herself. So that's my first book written in prose, and I'm looking forward to that one.
She lives inside her little box.
That's it, inside her little
Indeed,
box.
she does. What a pleasure to meet you. Joe Woes has joined us, and he makes mazes, and he's also the resident cartoonist at the Charles M. Schulz Museum in California. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Outside the Book continues. I'm Barbara Deeb, joined now by the headliner here at the 2018 Southern Kentucky Book Fest, Loren Long. Does that sound, when I say headliner, does that like make you nervous?
Yeah, well, it makes me nervous and proud.
You should be proud. You should be proud.
A little nervous, though. Yes,
you are
thanks.
a picture book illustrator and author. You have a new book out. It's called Love, but you also illustrated Barack Obama's book.
Yes.
And you also had one of the highest honors, I think, of any illustrator. You got to re-illustrate The Little Engine That Could.
Yeah,
One
that
of
was
the classics.
Yes, Barbara, that was in 2005, so it was early in my picture book career, but it was one of the biggest honors because of what that book has meant to so many millions of people in the world. And when they first gave me the opportunity to illustrate, it was Penguin publisher in New York. I thought, I'm not sure you can do that. Can you put new pictures to that classic? I realized the one that most of us grew up with was published in 1954, and it had originally been published with a different artist in 1930.
Oh.
So I'm technically the third illustrator to put new pictures to that classic. It's kind of like a folktale.
It is.
Little Engine.
And talk about being nervous or just the pressure. That had to be so how'd you decide what to make?
Well, it was the funnest thing, actually, once I calmed my nerves.
Sure.
Because really every book I do hope that lots of people will see it. So, and that's what I want. But when you're in your studio alone, you're realizing it's my job. Nobody else in the world has been given this opportunity. So it's really up to me to bring whatever's inside of here and my whole life to that. And it was a great honor to design what the clown looked like for The Little Engine That Could. It was a great honor to bring my vision to what the Little Blue Engine looked like. And I put away all the other books of Little Engine, the one that I grew up with, and I pretended it was just a brand new clean slate, a brand new clean manuscript that I got to illustrate.
So when you unveil it, and the powers that be are going to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, what was the response?
Oh man, I had a really wonderful editor at Penguin at the time, a woman named Patricia Gouch, and she kind of took me under her wing a little bit. She was a career veteran editor, and I was a new starting out illustrator. It's a process making a book. It's fun that my name is on the cover, but there's an art director, an editor, and oftentimes assistant editor and assistant art directors and designers that are helping me. So the unveiling is the final art, but before that comes a sketch phase. So
Gotcha.
They know what I'm going to do because I'm submitting my ideas via sketches, and we're making what they call a book dummy. It's kind of like planning a film.
Gotcha.
You know, storyboarding a film is similar to storyboarding a picture book.
Okay, so then let's take it to the first child you saw reading
yeah.
that book in their hands. What was that like?
It's a kind of a powerful thing, Barbara, really, and it's something that I don't think it'll ever get old to me. I didn't do my first picture book till I was in my late 30s. I had been an illustrator my whole career, but I never did publishing until I was almost 40. And I hope to be doing it when I'm 80, if I'm lucky. But it never gets old. Seeing the actual end result. I created a book series called Otis about a little tractor who's very much inspired by me growing up in Lexington, Kentucky and working on a horse farm. And for me to this day, to see complete strangers come to me in a signing, if I'm on a book tour and I happen to be in Iowa or San Francisco, and these young families come up to me with this little boy or girl, and they say her favorite book is Otis, that's the kind of stuff that matters to me more than any book award or headline or whatever, because that's the heart of what we're trying to do, you know? So at the end of the day, I do like that my life's art is dedicated to children, and when I get messed up or distracted by the business of it and the lists and the awards and the conferences, I always come back to, you know, my art is for these little kids and the families that get to spend time with their children, maybe reading one of my books.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, for the youngins that might be watching, you really didn't know that this was going to be your life's work. No. You kind of liked PE. You liked sports. That's what you wanted to do.
Right.
And it took you a little while to figure it out. You went to the University of Kentucky. It took you 5 years, but you took every art class you could take. Really?
Right.
Yeah.
I had about 4 to 5 different majors. Landed in arts and sciences, undecided for a while. Got into the architecture school, which took a little finagling because it's a wonderful architecture department at the University of Kentucky. But I, all throughout, just like in junior high school in Lexington, in high school, and in college, always the blank spot, the electives, were drawing, art, pottery, some kind of art class. So my parents were not artists. My father was a salesperson. He traveled around the state of Kentucky selling building supplies. My mother was a secretary for 20 different companies throughout my childhood.
So you don't know where this natural gift came from?
We didn't know any artists. Never saw my dad draw a picture. Never saw my mother draw. We think it's maybe my dad's side, but I really think it's more interest than it is talent sometimes. So to young people watching, I would say if you have a talent, whether it's art or something else, do it for fun. Do it for fun. I started getting a little serious in college, in high school, getting extra attention a little bit. I was never, and this is another thing I like the young people to hear, I was never the most talented artist in any of my classes.
Wow.
At every phase, there was always somebody better than me. You know, but I enjoyed it, and I really wanted to do it. And I was lucky there was a professor in a graphic design class at the University of Kentucky by the name of James Foose, and he's no longer around. But he was the one that started saying, "You're an illustrator." He defined my career before I knew what it was. So that's why I feel like love. People are giving you love. Sometimes you don't know it, you know?
Pay attention.
Yeah.
Pay attention. Okay, so the new book is Love. Then what?
Okay, so now, and you know, knock on wood that I don't mess it up, but I'm working on, so we work about 1.5 years in advance.
Wow.
So I've already done a book called There's a Hole in the Log at the Bottom of the Lake. And it's a silly folk song that I've made into a picture book. It's a song my wife's father sang to her whole childhood. And it's just a silly, goofy song, but it's repetitious, and I painted it. It comes out this September.
Okay.
And then I'm working on a book called If I Was the Sunshine, which is a lovely poem written by a woman up east named Julie Fogliano. So I still write some of my own material and illustrate other people's.
There you go. Well, continued success.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me.
We've been talking with Loren Long right here on Outside the Book. I'm Barbara Deeb. Thanks for joining us.